I mean, pretty disappointing. It's a small step, but I think I was hoping for a slightly bigger step.
For Rupert Crowfoot, who was diagnosed with prostate cancer, his sigh sums up how many campaigners are feeling about today's news from the National Screening Committee.
So I was first diagnosed nearly a couple of years ago. I was aged 56, always been reasonably fit and healthy. I had no symptoms whatsoever, no indication that I had anything wrong with me. And I was encouraged by a good friend. They caught his very early. He had a very good outcome. And he said, you really ought to go and get tested.
Rupert's test revealed he had prostate cancer, the most common among men in the UK. After initial successful treatment, he then found out the cancer had spread to his spine and is terminal.
My lifespan has been reduced and cut short, and if it had been caught early, it would have been a very different outcome and a very different prognosis for me, for my family, for my loved ones.
That's why today's announcement hit hard for Rupert. This kills 12,000 people across the UK each year. He wouldn't have been included in the draft recommendations made by the National Screening Committee. What they did do is suggest screening for men who have the BRCA1 or BRCA2 genetic mutation. Now, you might have heard of that with breast cancer before, and it's for men who are aged between 45 and 61. That's likely to be a few thousand men. What they didn't do is have other targeted screening for men who have a history of prostate cancer in their family, or black men who have twice the risk as white men of getting prostate cancer.
On the nationwide screening programme, we don't recommend it because we believe that the harms still outweigh the benefits. Urinary leakage, of sexual dysfunction, and so we don't think it'd be right to have a national screening programme for those people. We're focusing on the BRCA gene group, which is a small group, but we're focusing on it because they are at higher risk of getting prostate cancer, they're at higher risk of dying from prostate cancer, and they're at higher risk of it happening at a younger age.
At the National Screening Committee briefing, a lot of questions were focused on why black men who have a higher risk weren't recommended for screening.
The real problem that we have is that we just don't have enough reliable information on the UK black population. So we do need more data on their genetic, the socioeconomic, the biomarker, and the diagnostic data that could come from a trial.
The former Prime Minister David Cameron, along with Olympic champion Sir Chris Hoy, both underwent treatment for prostate cancer and expressed their disappointment. But some clinicians and Cancer Research UK say they welcome the recommendations. The Health Secretary Wes Streeting said, "I have always said I want to see screening in place for the most common cancer in men, provided this is backed by evidence." He goes on to say, "I will examine the evidence and arguments in this draft recommendation thoroughly, bringing together those with differing views." This is just a draft, and there'll be a public consultation which Rupert hopes to influence by speaking out. A final decision will be made in March.
Well, a short while ago, I spoke to the actor and prostate cancer campaigner Colin McFarlane after he was diagnosed with the disease in 2022, despite having no symptoms. And I began by asking him why he's disappointed at the advice of the expert panel.
Disappointed because it now means that, first of all, prostate cancer is the biggest cancer killer of men, more than breast cancer. And as we know, women have breast cancer screening nationally. The trouble with this verdict is that there are a lot of men who are high risk, either because they're black men, who are 1 in 4, double the risk of other men, or there's people with family history of cancer. Now, if we leave it like this, that we don't have a national screening program, then many more men will frankly die. When I got diagnosed back in December 2022, I told both my brothers, who are older than me, who didn't know anything about it, and I said, go and get a PSA test. Both of my brothers, my middle brother, his first PSA test led to diagnosis. My elder brother, his second PSA test led to diagnosis. Both of them have had to have operations as a result. And that all started with a PSA blood test. So the reason I'm frustrated on behalf of all the organisations and campaigners like Prostate Cancer UK, who've been working really hard to convince the government to do this, is that we know 10,000 men a year are diagnosed too late for a cure. I have prostate cancer, but people always go to me, what treatment am I having? I'm not having chemo, I'm not having radiotherapy because I caught it early.
Yeah.
And why? Because I tested every year for 6 years.
But as you know, that this panel has said that the risks of over-treatment and the fact that there are lots of false positives and false negatives with the PSA test, you know, means that the harm outweighs the good. I mean, might it not be the case that...
And they're not correct, yeah.
Well, you just think they're wrong?
I'm afraid, Christian. Yes, testing has improved, so the risks are far smaller. Things have improved massively over the last 10 years. MRI scanners are far more efficient than they ever were. Testing is far more specific than it ever was. So I think those are kind of... Those facts aren't right. What I'm guided by is how many lives can we save and how many lifestyles? Because the other factor is you catch this too late. Men end up with things we don't talk about, erectile dysfunction and incontinence. You test regularly, as I did. That's how I caught it early. It is still the best weapon we have.
You know, one of the other arguments is that you can go to the GP and you can ask for a PSA test if you're in one of the higher risk groups. Might you not achieve more by a targeted awareness campaign? No, because the issue at the moment is there's just a lack of awareness around prostate in general. So what you'll find is, as a result of this now, there'll be a lot of men going, I'm going to get a PSA test. And they go to the GP and the GP says, you haven't got any pain, you haven't got any symptoms, you don't need a test. And I get this every week. Men going, I've been turned away. And as I keep banging on to people, I have no pain, I have no symptoms, but I have prostate cancer. And so that's the point. As specialists will tell you, it's known as a silent killer for a reason, which is why you have to test. And also, it actually will save the NHS money. So it saves them money, it saves lives, it's a no-brainer. The best weapon we have is a PSA blood test. If you've got a high number, you then have to have an MRI, which has become far more accurate. And if you then have something they're concerned about, you have a biopsy. That's what I had. I had no issues along that route. I caught it early, and I'm in a really good place. I'm under what you call active surveillance. I have a PSA blood test every 3 months, and I have an MRI once a year. And if men are out there listening to this, please, if you're over 45 and you're black, if you're over 50 and you're white, go and get that PSA blood test, because that is the best weapon you have. Do you think there's anything else going on here about the fact that this is men we're talking about, and black men twice as likely to suffer? That might be an element here. I think absolutely could be an issue. I mean, certainly that inequality is being exacerbated by this because it does affect black men more than other men. So, yeah, I'm sure that's a factor. And also the elephant in the room with all of this is that because black men don't trust the NHS, they don't come forward in enough numbers to get the evidence that they're saying that the National Screening Programme are saying this is based on. There isn't the evidence. And I think the concerns about over-testing and it being inaccurate, I think, are way off the mark compared to the costs of the lives you'll save and the costs you'll save. And that's what we have to focus on. And I hope that they'll overturn this decision with more people like me yelling about it, because it really is important. Colin McFarlane, thank you very much. My pleasure. And if you've been affected by any of the issues we've been discussing, you can seek help by going to channel4.com/support.